Hey everyone, Aaron here with Elite Watersports, hanging out the Skyway Bridge on this beautiful winter morning. And today's video is all about relaunching. This isn't just for beginners, it's for advanced riders also. A couple different techniques, stay tuned. Hey everyone, Aaron here with Elite Watersports, and today's video is all about relaunching techniques, all right? This isn't a beginner video. This is for every skill level in kiteboarding, okay? Doesn't matter if the wind's high or low, but of course these techniques are gonna help tremendously in those low winds. Obviously, you wanna make sure that you can master these techniques in shallow water. Hopefully you're blessed with that. And then go out to the deeper water. One day you will use them. And what we really wanna hone in on is that sometimes these techniques, whatever you start with may not work. You have to go to the next one, the next one, the next one, until something works for you, okay? So here it goes. That very first technique that we're gonna learn is obviously the standard relaunch for beginners. Everybody's gonna know how to do that. That's bringing that kite all the way to the edge of the window and relaunching it, right? Then we're gonna go over that front line relaunch. We're gonna go over a C-Kite relaunch, trailing edge relaunch, and then the ultimate, right? Stay tuned for that, the reverse launch. Okay, so obviously this isn't going to be a beginner video, but maybe we can give you a little bit of tidbits on like how to make your beginner life a little bit easier, right? And you know, everybody knows that situation where that kite gets right to the edge of the window and now it's not relaunching for them, and you know, you're starting to get a little bit of frustrated because it's not releasing from the water. But if you take a couple steps forward into the breeze, okay, you're going to increase the wind speed. So instead of being here like a statue, move into the breeze as you're steering the kite, and you'll see that it'll get a lot more power into the canopy, okay? That doesn't necessarily work if that kite is downwind already crashed. It works if it's already on the edge of the window. So don't be a statue, run into the breeze. Increase that wind speed by moving around. Now what happens if that doesn't work, right? It's gonna get a little bit more frustrating because you're gonna be really working those steering lines, trying to get it to release, and all of a sudden that kite falls backwards into the window like this. Okay, so everybody's been in that situation before, right? All these techniques are actually going to stem from one thing, and one thing only. That's going to be a hot launch, right? What is a hot launch? A hot launch is any kind of launch where that kite is really deep into the pocket, into that wind window, where it's going to have a lot of power once it releases from the water. Now remember, a lot of these techniques are based on light winds, right? Because modern day kites, they launch by themselves these days, right? So in a light wind scenario, the kite's not going to be too aggressive. So make sure that you understand, once that kite releases, it is going to have a little bit of power to pull you, right? Just go with it. So that first technique, let's just, you know, utilize those front lines and doing some hot launches on their front lines, right? So this is going to be an example of a hot launch kind of deep down into the pocket, where I'm going to utilize just my front lines to really get some tension on the canopy, relieve the tension on the actual wingtips, so the kite's more able to fly with a little bit less drag. So I'm going to grab those front lines up here where the D-power strap is. That makes a really nice handle. I'm going to pull it, and you can see that that little bit of pressure just on my front lines will cause that kite to flip over, and now I'm back into that traditional relaunch position. After I do that, I can go into my traditional relaunch. That's going to be with the steering line, bringing that kite to the edge of the window. Well, what happens if possibly you don't have enough breeze and the kite does that, right? So if the kite does that, it's going to be actually like really straight downwind from you, maybe dragging. Or if it's right on the edge of the window, wait for that kite to get a little deeper into the pocket, downwind from you. And if the kite looks like this, all you have to do is add some pressure to the front lines, kind of walk backwards really gently, and you'll see that maybe sometimes the canopy fills up with water, and if it does, just walk towards it. That'll stream the water out. And if all the water is out of the canopy, now all of a sudden you can walk backwards again, and you can see all the pressures on the front lines, and the kite will reset itself. So really getting used to that technique of adding pressure just to your front lines, slackening your steering lines, will usually reset the kite almost automatically. Let's work on that trailing edge relaunch, right? That's where that kite's gonna fall backwards onto its trailing edge. You're gonna grab the front lines and shoot it up into the wind window. And hopefully that kite is actually positioned and balanced itself where it's almost aiming straight up at 12 o'clock. And if it's not aiming at 12 o'clock, if it's off to the left a little bit, you know that once it releases from the water, it's gonna shoot that direction, almost as if that center strut is an arrow, right? So if that arrow is shooting off to 10 o'clock, that's where that kite's going. So prepare yourself as that kite releases, boom, it's going to 10 o'clock, I need to steer it to 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock is your goal. A high kite is a happy kite, especially in light winds. So here we go. I'm gonna purposely make this kite fall backwards into the window. And you can almost use these techniques to practice it yourself, right? So the kite's now underwater on its trailing edge. I'm gonna grab these front lines, just like you were almost taught a second ago. And notice that I'm just sucking more water onto the canopy. All I have to do is walk towards the kite. That'll stream the water off the canopy. And then I walk back upwind. So this is actually swimming in deep water. You're gonna swim towards the kite. I know it's counterintuitive, but sometimes you have to swim towards the kite. So as that kite releases from the water, all that water comes off the canopy, and look how the kite is facing about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock right now. What I wanna do is steer it left a little bit. So now the kite's facing 12 o'clock. And that's going to be the trailing edge hot launch, right? All right, so I'm gonna reach up to those front lines. I'm gonna try to level out the kite. I can take my time here. I keep that bar sheeted in so it doesn't want to relaunch. Notice the leading edge is almost square with the wind window. That center strut straight at 12 o'clock. So when I relieve the tension on the steering lines, add all the pressure to my front lines, watch what happens. Super easy, super fast. Hardly any technique needed. One of these techniques you've probably been waiting for is a one line, which is your front line, relaunch. This is a technique not many people know. I haven't really seen it too much in the industry. I use it a lot with foiling, especially in deep water where I'm out in like 5 knots, 7 knots max, right? So what I do is I reach up, right? And I'm swimming sometimes in deep water. I'm gonna reach up and grab one of the front lines, okay? And whatever front line I grab, I wanna grab the opposite steering line. And watch what happens. This kite will actually rotate extremely fast, almost pivotable, right? Onto its trailing edge. And then I go into that traditional hot launch where I'm grabbing the front lines and trying to zoom that kite up to 12 o'clock. So watch this. So grab the front lines, I go into steering the back lines, and because I'm putting all the pressure on one of the front lines, that kite will actually, look how fast it rotates. I let go of that front line, I grab both front lines now as I'm kind of swimming backwards, and boom. All right, here it is, guys, the reverse launch. The reverse launch is super cool. It's a tool that I use constantly, whether it's me teaching lessons or me out in the water doing some foiling and stuff, or just maybe my kite's on the beach and I'm doing a launch, right? A self launch. Check it out. So what you're gonna do is reach up about a foot or so, past the leader lines is usually perfect, gives you a little knot to hold on to, and you gotta be prepared that red is going to end up on my left side. So if that is confusing to you, go ahead and pre-spin your bar. So red's already on your left. And what's going to happen is when I pull on these two leader lines, pretty aggressively, right? I kind of like pump it off the water. The kite's gonna actually fly backwards. And once it gets off the water and releases, I'm actually gonna let go of one of the steering lines. It doesn't matter which one. If you wanna always pick red, that's cool, whatever. So here it goes, right? So I'm gonna grab those 2 leader lines. I'm gonna pump that kite up, and hopefully for the video's purposes, it works. Not every time does it work. See how it reverses? I'm gonna release and then go into that traditional relaunch. Kind of cool, right? Not every kite on the market's gonna be able to do that. So make sure you go out here in the shallow water, practice to see if your kite can actually do it, right? The reach by North, you can see it was a little tough. Some of the kites, if you just barely pull those leader lines, the thing will shoot up 5-10 feet off the water, and it's almost flying the whole entire time. So check out your own equipment and see if it's possible. All right, the final finishing touch, the technique that I use actually quite frequently, and it is definitely for the conditions where it's like the ultimate no wind at all. Like you're out of all the other techniques, they haven't worked, and this one, if this doesn't work, typically the kite's not gonna fly for you, right? This is the old school C-Kite launch, I like to call it, because back in the day when I got into kiteboarding, these kites didn't want to relaunch like what we know today. You actually had to do this technique to relaunch it every single time. Or you needed a 5th line, or you needed a 2nd rider to help you. So we're gonna actually look at that canopy and look at that leading edge. It's down into the water, right? And we actually want that leading edge to kind of be stuck into the water a bit so that the water actually kind of holds it in one position. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually grab the front lines, and I want to run towards the kite or swim towards the kite. And what's gonna happen is the canopy, the whole kite's gonna actually rotate so that that canopy faces the sky, and then I go into a traditional relaunch, all right, with one of the steering lines. So watch what happens. I surge for it, and then I go into one of my steering lines. That's a perfect example of an old school C-Kite relaunch. In conclusion, we've learned that just about every technique stems from a frontline relaunch, a hot launch, okay? So being comfortable with your hand positioning on your particular equipment and being able to hold on to those front lines, not get any tangles around your fingers, and safety is always first, but being comfortable with that, right? Because if you watch the videos over again, you'll see that just about everything I did led up to ultimately that frontline relaunch, right? These techniques are really, really great to learn. And you know what? If it's light winds out there, go out there and practice. You don't have to go out to the beach to go ride. Sometimes it's just fun to go fly your kite, right? So this is Aaron with Elite Water Sports. Hopefully you learned something new today. And I gotta tell you, make sure that you share this video to your buddies, even if they're advanced riders. I've seen a lot of riders out there that don't even know how to do that C-Kite relaunch. It is super huge, and it will definitely revolutionize your riding. This is Aaron with Elite Water Sports. We'll catch you next time on the water.